Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Smart Trucking Live. Glad that you could all join us today. Love to see you here. Josh Bulldog is here. Hey, Josh, I'll get to your question in a second there. Rastamar is here. Kelly Patterson is here. Good afternoon, Kelly. Daniel Meredith. Has been a little while, Daniel. Glad to see you. Thank you for joining us. Grafton is here. SoCal Sandman has made it. Glad you could join us. Chef Matt is here. Lee Harvey is here. Tim Field is here. Tales of the Gun is here. Got a good crowd rolling in. Michael Crowley. Maybe Dreaming is here. Danny Moore is here. Bonanza Transport. Glad you guys could all join us today. It's Captain Nice Guy is here. Abraham is here. Hello all to Abraham. Hey SoCal Sandman, how are you doing? Jonathan Mestrel's here. Hey guys, good to be back. Good to see you back. Andrew Mitchell, hey from Saskatchewan. Already sat in a 2.5 hour lineup at Cargill this morning. Always fun. Always fun. Let me pick off Josh's question here right from the top. Josh, which is better, the X15 Cummins or the PACCAR MX-13 Mac MP8? I honestly can't say that I know a whole lot about the Mac motor. As far as the Cummins and the PACCAR are concerned, I think they're probably pretty much equally matched, but if I were buying a Kenworth or a Pete, I would get the PACCAR engine just because you get a more extended warranty usually when you buy the entire drivetrain from PACCAR. So that would be my choice in that situation. Just so you know. What else we got going on here? Kelly Patterson, thank you for the $10. Appreciate it very much. GP Transco raised their pay by 8 cents a mile. Base is now 58 cents per mile without the drive camera and 60 cents per mile with the drive camera. Yeah, Kelly, that's pretty damn good money, isn't it? That's incredible. They do everything right over there. I really like those guys as a carrier. So thank you for the donation, Kelly. I appreciate it. Tales of the Gun is in Phoenix. Man, I wish I was in Phoenix right now. I like it down there. I like that. I like the climate. I like the climate. Maybe Dreamin' just had his shortest unloading time, bumped the dock and was unloaded within 6 minutes. That's some sort of a record. That never happened to me. Danny Moore's in Houston. Good afternoon, Captain Nice Guy. Hello all. Okay, so before we get into it, there's always lots going on in trucking right now. And I came across an interesting story the other day, and I had to dive right into it, and I thought you guys would like this story. And it turns out there's a big fight between Canadian National Rail and Canadian Pacific Rail to buy this rail company down in Kansas City called Kansas City Southern. And I didn't understand what the excitement was and why all of a sudden these two Canadian rail companies would want to buy this Kansas City rail line. But it turns out there's a serious method to their madness. Kansas City Southern owns rail lines right into Mexico. So both CN and CP now see that as a huge advantage, being able to run trains right from Canada straight through the States and into Mexico. And what they're going to target is the truck freight, specifically the automotive truck freight that runs out of Mexico and into the US and Canada. And that adds up to thousands and thousands of truckloads that either one of these rail carriers will be able to do for less money than you could ever do it by truck. And that's going to have a huge impact. Should this deal go through, it will have a huge impact on the trucking industry. Like, it's smart business for these rail outfits, but they can move stuff a lot cheaper than we can. They can move a lot more at one time than we can. So that's a big deal, and we'll have to see how that pans out. They're offering billions of dollars, and they're competing against each other, CN and CP, competing against each other to buy this Kansas City Southern rail line because they want that automotive traffic out of Mexico, and it's going to be huge. So there's something worth keeping an eye on right there. That is big news, and I didn't get it at first until I found out they went into Mexico. Then I got it.
Jacob, thank you very much for the $10 donation. He says hello from Amarillo, Texas. Hope your day is going good. Thank you very much for the 10, Jacob. Hope yours is too.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it very much. Amarillo, Texas. Head for the Big Texan. Best steaks in the country. I used to stop there every time I was through there. Never missed. Love that restaurant.
So Cal Sandman had a question about the restaurant. I go to Danny's Big Resort.
Big Dan. That's not ringing a bell with me, SoCal Sandman. Where,
Tell me what you're talking about.
man, whereabouts is that in, as you're traveling through Phoenix? Is that on the south side of the interstate?
Nobody knows what you're talking about.
SoCal Sandman 780 says, Dave, ever go to Danny's Big Rig Resort in Phoenix? And I don't believe that I have. It rings a bell. And I'm trying to figure out if I was to someplace one time on the south side of the interstate there, and I can't remember what the name of it was. I can't honestly remember, to tell you the truth. Matt's Garage, looking at a 1994 Kenworth T8 with a 60 series engine. What are your thoughts? T8 was probably the best constructed truck that Kenworth ever built. 60 series motors, good engines. I'd like to know, if you can get a hold of as much of the history of this truck, what it's done, what it's, how it's been worked, how often was the oil change, stuff like that, the maintenance records on it. Like, it's a good bare bones truck. As long as it hasn't been abused, it would probably be an excellent truck. Yeah, hey, this is Josh Bulldog. Hey, Dave, are PACCAR engines always in the shop? Too much computer problems? Josh, when the PACCAR engines do seem to have trouble, it's almost always sensor related, it seems. So yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement. They do have issues with their sending units, their sensors, but to be honest, so does everybody else. So they're not alone there, and they all buy sending units and sensors from the same manufacturers. They don't make their own. So that's a big problem these days with trucks is faulty sending units, and it shuts the engines down sometimes. It's a problem, and they haven't solved it yet. They need to work on it. Mr. Solo found our channel. I answered his question live chat like 3 months ago. I took your advice and got myself into the industry on the dispatch side. Way to go, Mr. Solo. Welcome and congratulations. He's enjoying the new challenges, he says. It is high. Yeah, it's a high stress job. It is a high stress, but I hope you stick with it and I hope you enjoy it. Happiness by sharing experience. While I'm at a red signal in neutral gear, when I change gear to lower gears, it's grinding. Is this a manual transmission, I'm assuming? But it sounds like the clutch brake is gone. You make sure you depress the clutch all the way to the floor, leave it for like 15 seconds to make sure the clutch brake engages, and then try to shift it. And if it's still grinding, it means the clutch brake is gone. You need a new clutch brake. Whipbone. I took a job with a moving company and they were scamming me lots of hours, so I left. them all the way out to Ontario and back to Labrador with them a few times. That's a long trip. It's too bad, you know. And moving companies. I did that for a summer when I was young. That's tough work slugging furniture around. So it's, you know, that's the last kind of you don't want to get cheated on any job. But man, after you put in a physically exhausting day and then to find out they've ripped you off on your pay, just, you know, I don't even know what to say to that. I don't know how carriers can pull that kind of crap. So he got a job in Labrador with a logging company. That'd be cool work. That'd be something that I would find very interesting. I'd love to try like serious logging in the bush, like Labrador, British Columbia, something like that. I never got to do it, but it would be certainly something I would have liked to have tried.
You'd have to stay awake for more than 8 hours at a time.
Oh yeah, the hours I'm sure can be brutal, and I'm not a young man anymore, but in my heyday I probably could have stayed awake long enough to do the job. Michael Crowley, having trouble deciding whether to stay at a dedicated job home weekends plus 1 to 2 nights a week, or OTR out 3 weeks, but 12 cents more a mile. Baby due in September. Opinions? Michael, I'd stick with the job that you've got rather than jump over the road, especially if you've got a baby due. So that's my take on it anyway. I'm sure your wife would agree with me, and she's half the formula here, but my instant reaction is stick with the job that you have. 12 cents a mile more is only any good if you're getting all the miles you want, and still then you know, you're giving up home time with a new baby. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. That's my opinion on it anyway. Whipbone says, hoping to have my uncle's Freightliner Classic with a DD12 on the road in my name soon. Well, that'd be cool. There's a nice truck. Yeah, that'd be great. Looking forward to that, I bet, Whitbone. Where did that go? Chris Keller, what are your thoughts on trucks going towards automatics? I personally am not a fan of automatics. Chris, I can see the upside of automatics for company trucks, for new drivers, because it gives them one less thing they have to worry about when they're driving, especially if they're trying to maneuver around town and stuff. It's just one less thing to worry about. Would I buy one for myself? No. I drove one briefly for a company here in my town. Didn't particularly care for it. I know that when these automatics break, they're a whole lot more expensive than repairing or replacing a manual transmission. And you know, I have friends that tell me that are running these automatic trucks that it greatly improves the fuel mileage. So if you're getting a mile to the gallon better, like this one guy told me, I can certainly see the sense in that, especially if you're running a fleet of trucks and each one of those trucks is getting a mile to the gallon more. There's a big cost advantage. So I can see both sides of the argument. I really can. Me personally, I'll stick with the standard. Matthew Pesco, starting a new job on Monday. I finally got my foot in running lowboy. Great job with great pay. Matthew, congratulations. That's great. That's good. That'll be interesting work. I hope you enjoy it. Good job. Josh Bulldog, everyone's staying away from the new digital dash in the Pete 389. Yeah, Josh, I haven't talked to anybody yet that likes the look of that new dash. And I am sure that when that calfs out and has a problem, I bet you that's thousands to replace that dash, that digital dash. Whereas before you're just swapping out a gauge. That happens every once in a while. But I bet you that dash is worth thousands of dollars to replace. Trucker Life D. Hey sir, been driving reefer and dry van for 5 years. Good, Trucker Life D. I hope you're enjoying the work. I know I did. Loved Love the trucking industry. Love the driving. I love the driving. Yeah, Tim Field gives good advice here. He says, "Hey, Josh, stay away from as much of the electronics as possible." That's what I try to do too, because it seems like that's where you have the trouble these days, is with the electronics, with electronic issues. Everything else works pretty simply, and they pretty much got it down pat. But the electronics are still an issue. Huh. Captain Nice Guy says, "That's what killed my first marriage too, Kelly Patterson." Yeah, no. Time away over the road can kill a marriage. It's all right for single guys. It's really tough on married couples. And P. Diddy, good point. But should someone who can't handle having to think about just one more thing really be behind the wheel of an 80,000-pound rig? Excellent point, and I really can't argue that. But the big carriers, the mega carriers, are to the stage these days where they're having to hire guys that can't focus on everything at once that there is to do. So it's not like it used to be when everyone got into trucking. They were, kind of mechanically inclined. They enjoyed driving and stuff like that. They've had to make the trucks simpler because a lot of these people applying for these jobs now, and the mega carriers got to take them, just aren't driving oriented, a lot of them. So they have to learn from scratch, and some of them are coming from countries where they didn't even have cars now.
Did you say not driving oriented?
Yes, that's what I said.
What does that mean?
They just don't have a natural feel for driving. Some of them didn't grow up driving cars or trucks or something like that. So it's tougher for those people because they're starting from behind. So it's not the same crowd getting into trucking these days that used to, and a lot of times it's people coming out of factories as well that never intended to drive for a living, but now their factory is shut down. They've got to do something. The only work they can find is with a mega carrier, and those people don't want to necessarily be there, but they've got to do it to make a living, to pay the bills. So if you can make life simpler for someone like that, why not? And that's what the mega carriers are looking at too. They, all over the mega carrier driver shortage. It's not a real driver shortage. It's a mega carrier driver shortage.
Jacob,
good point.
Jacob, thank you very much for the $5. He wants to know how the Lettuce King has been.
Kathy talked to him the other day, and he sounded a little bit down. I don't think he's enjoying the job he's got right now too much, but he's bored. Yeah, he's bored, Kathy says. So that's the answer on that, Jacob. We appreciate the $5. Thank you. I'll pass on your best wishes to him, but usually when he's quiet, it's kind of like poking a bear with a stick. You're better to not poke him. You better let him recover his sense of humor. So if his job is getting boring for him, he'll figure it out. He always does. Antonio, generally, how much tanker experience is needed to get into one of those good-paying tanker companies that can make up to $100K a year? Good question, Antonio. And I would say these days, if you can get a year's experience or a couple years experience, and it doesn't have to be tanker experience, if you can pull dry box for a couple years and then hit the tanker outfits, they want good people too. So if you can get a couple years accident-free in the seat, I'm sure they'll have a good serious look at you. And there's some pretty good jobs in tanker work. What's my opinion on the huge POV disconnection between driver, dispatcher, broker, and customer? I see a lot of unrealistic loads being posted that need illegal time frame and very cheap. Mr. Solo, good point. It's hard to know where to start with that. The problem is that there are so many people now in trucking, in the trucking industry, not driving the truck so much, but in the trucking industry, like load brokers, especially load brokers, that have no clue what it entails to move freight from point A to point B, or to drive one of these trucks through bad weather or something. And dispatchers suffer from that. Even trucking managers and owners these days suffer from that. And it is a serious problem. And that's when I worry about drivers, because the drivers can't allow themselves to be pushed around by people that don't understand what they're asking. And it's a tough position for drivers to be in. And all you can do is just judge the situation and proceed safely. And to hell with what they want and what they say in the time schedules they post. And if it's cheap freight, just don't do it. You're better to stay at home, because if you have a cheap load, then the truck breaks down, you've lost money. It's as simple as that. So nobody wants to go to work to lose money. But yeah, you're right. Serious disconnect in the industry these days. Never used to be that way. Chris Keller, PACCAR messed up with the digital dash. I believe Western Star's 49X will take classic style sales. Interesting. I always liked the Western Stars. I had one. It was a company truck. I had one in 1979 that was a really nice truck. It was a company truck, but it was a beautiful truck. It's going back a while ago now. Josh Bulldog, Dave and Kat, great job on the engine info video on your YouTube. Very informative. Thanks, Josh. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thunderstorm 87, thoughts on the recent Tesla autonomous deadly incident? Proof one more time that Tesla doesn't have everything together that it needs to have together to operate a safe vehicle. And the National Transportation Safety Board, for a couple of years now, since they had their first major crash in Florida, and that was a few years ago, the National Transportation Safety Board has been giving pointers and suggestions of things they'd like to see implemented by Tesla. And Elon Musk has just completely ignored it. And I guess his take is that a certain percentage of accidents are acceptable in his research development. I completely disagree. I don't think vehicles like that should be allowed on the road unless Musk can prove that they're safe and they perform every time, 100% of the time, the way they're supposed to. But I know Musk has got a lot of money. He's got a lot of pull. So there's the problem. But yeah, I think it's, I don't accept the loss of human life for the sake of autonomous development. I think that's ridiculous. Captain Nice Guy, if someone offers you a job as a safety driver, run away. Absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. For those of you that don't understand what a safety driver is, that's someone who sits and babysits the autonomous truck while it tries to drive itself through traffic and down the highway. And that's just it's going to be a low-paying position where no matter what goes wrong, it's going to be the safety driver's fault at the end of the day. So you just don't want that job for love or money.
Jonathan coming in with a 50 bomb on the stream. Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. Very generous donation of 50 beans. Love the channel, guys. Keep up the great content. Keep an eye out for the comment, and we will do that. We will read your comment when we see it. Thank you again, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. That's a big hit. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. Ironwood Workmen. If you ask Guys of the Lettuce King what he made gross and net for the last 3 years he drove, I bet he could tell you at the drop of a dime. Yes, he could. Yes, he absolutely could. And he made some pretty serious money because sometimes he hauled some pretty heavy loads. But that was the name of the game. It was a lot easier then to make money at it, and he was pretty good. He really was. He did what needed to be done. We'll just say that. Al Stewart, you may not agree with this, Dave, but I had a job come my way that I didn't apply for and did a run with the owner from Salmon Arm to Edmonton and Winnipeg and back. And he was impressed with my driving. If it wasn't for you, Al, I wouldn't disagree with you at all. That's a pretty run that you did. I like the terrain. But hey, man, if it's your call. If it doesn't suit you, or if something doesn't feel right about it, absolutely not. There's a ton of jobs out there always. So no, you can afford to be picky. And that's a long trip that you're talking about, because that's not 75-mile-an-hour interstate there either. So, but pretty route. But no, you've got to do what's best for you. Oh, absolutely.
Gersman Alua, I believe I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. Thank you very much for the $5 donation, my friend. What are some good carriers for an owner-operator out of Calgary? What do you think of Landstar? Planning my own load sounds nice. Thank you very much for the $5, Gersman.
Thank you for the donation. Landstar has hiring hubs everywhere, but Landstar isn't heavy with freight everywhere. So you've really got to be careful if you're going to lease on with Landstar that wherever you want to run, they have freight, lots of freight at both ends, and good paying freight. So yeah, while it's nice to be able to book your own loads and move around, you've got to realize that Landstar has huge gaps in their system. There was a time with Landstar that you couldn't get out of California, for instance. You could get there, but you couldn't get out. All sorts of guys would get stuck out in California. So you've just got to be careful where you go with those people, and check out the rates, the freight rates for wherever it is you want to move, and be prepared to do some empty miles.
Patrick coming in with the 10. Thank you very much for that, Patrick. Been running flatbed step deck in Conestoga as a local driver by the hour, and occasionally an OTR run paid percentage. Love my company. Nice small family-owned company. Everyone is treated like family. Thank you very much for the donation there, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it. And it sounds like you've got a good gig going there, so glad to hear that. Appreciate the donation.
Can I just interject?
You bet.
You didn't give the trucking companies out of Calgary the fellow asked.
I'm really not familiar anymore with who's out of Calgary, other than he says Landstar is. But I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of great carriers out of there. Bison, I'm sure, has a terminal out of Calgary. Trimac might be of interest to you. I know they have a terminal in Calgary. Not the greatest looking equipment, but they pay well. Mullen, if you're willing to travel south to Alderside, which is not too far south, Mullins has all sorts of really good jobs and really good pay. I think I'd start checking Mullins out of Alderside. Jonathan Mestro got forced out of the middle lane yesterday by a driver on his phone in the right lane. Another truck in the left lane was speeding and couldn't slow in time to react. Destroyed my plastic. It's, there are some not very good drivers out there, Jonathan. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but yeah, you've got to drive defensively like all the time, because you just don't know what these fools around you are going to do. I completely sympathize. It's tough anymore.
That's not usually how you describe them as not very good drivers. You usually have a better line than that.
I'm trying to be politically correct on YouTube here. I'm trying to resist using profane language. But you know what I mean, Jonathan. You know what I think. Marshall Jones, new CDL owner-operator. What are your thoughts? Marshall, I worry about new guys jumping right into being owner operators because there's so much to learn. And even, as a new drivers are going to make mistakes, cornering too sharply or something like that. I worry about new drivers having their own trucks. I prefer new drivers break themselves in and get a little experience on the company trucks first. That way, if there's going to be a truck take a bit of a beating, it can be the company equipment. And honestly, there's a lot to being an owner-operator, like an awful lot. And I'm talking keeping up with the paperwork and keeping up with the maintenance and keeping up with things that you need to update on the truck to make sure that the resale value is going to be there when you want to trade up. Marshall, I'm hesitant to suggest owning your own truck if you're just getting into the industry. I suggest you give it a few years, get some seat time in a company truck, learn a bit more there, and then think about whether you want to be an owner-operator or not. The owner-operator market these days is pretty tough too. It's not just you buy a truck, you start making money. It doesn't work that way anymore. It used to be, not anymore. So I'm hesitant. I'm worried for you. I hope that answers your question. Christopher Patrick, is Challenger's driver finishing program reputable? First-hand experience? Challenger, I can't speak to their program, Christopher, but Challenger is a very reputable carrier. And I would bet dimes to donuts they'd be doing it right down there. So I wouldn't be afraid at all to approach and get into that with them just because of their reputation. They're a very good outfit. Yeah, Michael Mueller says, check Herb for another cool move. Another really good carrier out of this area. Michael's right. Herb is a top-notch carrier here. So you couldn't really go wrong with either one of those guys. SoCal Sandman says, Landstar's military freight pays the best. And yeah, I have spoken to some guys that have hauled that, and it pays really well. In fact, I believe there are guys on at Landstar that's all they'll haul is military stuff, just because of the money. But yeah, good catch there, Sandman. You're right. Scott Kuhn says, I think Landstar doesn't have any independent contractors in California because of the AB5, and that might be right. You might be right about that, Scott. I wouldn't be surprised. Bonanza Transport says Trimac has been around since they started making dirt, so they should know what they're doing. And he's right about that. Trimac's been around a long time, and they're actually huge if you look at the company. Like I used to see Trimac yards in Wyoming and stuff like that. So they're a lot bigger than what you think. And I believe now they're back to being privately owned. They were publicly owned and traded for a while, and I believe the original owners bought back those shares and own it privately again, which is even better. But yeah, they've been around a long time.
Question for Mr. Solo. What are the worst commodities you have ever hauled?
I'd have to say that when I was doing chemical tanker work, I hauled some pretty darn nasty stuff. I guess that's the worst stuff I ever hauled. And you don't really think about it at the time. You just concentrate on your driving and concentrate on not getting hit by some fool. But after you get the load delivered and you stand back and think about the stuff that you've just hauled across the country and how lucky you were that somebody didn't get you, it can shake up your day, because some of that stuff is so nasty. I don't some of the stuff is so nasty you wonder if they should be hauling it at all. But I guess that's the worst stuff I've ever hauled, some of the chemical stuff.
Daniel, thank you very much for the $5 dono. He says he has a question about going to Swift rather to get my CDL. I believe what he's trying to say here is he wants to know if it's the best choice based on his experience. He paid off his loan, but horrible pay from Swift. I think that's what he's trying to put together there.
Yeah, the pay is not great.
He did another $5 dono, so I'll read that one off as well. Thank you for another 5, obviously, Daniel. But now I'm with YRC/Yellow. I'm getting paid $24.16 an hour. Great benefits, getting paid time off. Thank you very much for the donations, Daniel.
Yes, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, YRC, top paying outfit, good outfit. Here's Mr. Solo again. What's your advice on learning the market for a 53 drive-in? Good areas versus bad areas. The nice thing about a dry box is that you can pretty much go anywhere with it. What you've got to be careful about, and that's what Mr. Solo is getting at here, are what are the areas that pays better and some of the areas that don't pay so well with the dry box. That's the kind of thing you've kind of almost got to keep an eye on the market. Like if you're talking about not pulling for a steady customer, I always tried to get steady customers because I do not like load brokers and load boards. But if you've got to play the load broker game, you've really got to keep an eye on where freight seems heavy, like industrial areas, like where the car plants are and stuff like that, and watch what the freight pays in those major hubs. And sadly, you're going to find out that, you know, some of the Eastern Seaboard dry freight pays really well, but half the time it's because nobody wants to go there, or you're in an ugly area or something when you're delivering. So you've got to be careful. It's a tricky deal. So if you are wanting to run dry box, I try to secure some steady customers right in your area so you don't have to go shopping with these load brokers, because that's like throwing the dice every time you want to work the truck.
Raphael, thank you very much for the $10 donation, my friend. Prime Inc. versus Schneider for CDL training program.
Sorry, Nick, I missed that.
Prime or Schneider for training?
Now, Kathy informs me that, and she follows this stuff more than I, that Prime really has an excellent training program, and I believe you told me that Schneider doesn't even run their own training program anymore. Isn't that correct or no?
They have schools that
Schneider's contracts out to schools, so
it depends where you are.
it depends on where you are then, and who Schneider is contracted out with, that, you know, that school in that area. But apparently, by all accounts, Prime has excellent school truck driver training.
But it's not much good to you if it's post training that the work isn't that good. So.
Yeah, but make sure if you go to Prime and you're coming out of school at Prime, they're going to try their hardest to get you sign up as a lease operator. Don't do it. They have good company driving jobs, and go for that.
Daniel, thank you for another $5 donation. I see now with what you specified there, what it was supposed to read as. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So thank you for all your donations, by the way. And Gary Dornbush, welcome back to the stream after a couple of weeks. Good to see you in the chat this afternoon, my friend.
James Jones, any advice for a new driver? Just move slowly, move cautiously, check everything 4 times, don't get excited, try to stay calm and relaxed, and don't rush. Just take it easy. That's the best advice I can give. Don't get rattled, go slow, move slow, check everything constantly. Be careful. And watch out for everybody. Assume everybody in a car is out to hit you. So all I can say is be careful. You'll be fine. I encourage anyone getting into the industry to finance their training independently through a good school and then get a job out of school. That's from NP Diddy, and that's probably sound advice, because if you do end up taking your school from a carrier, you're kind of locked into that carrier. And some of the carriers like to take advantage of their new guys that are locked into the contract. So probably a better way to go about it if you can afford it. And that way you can pick and choose the carrier that you want to work for. Good advice. Thank you. This is Al Stewart. Thought of your story about your experience crossing the ferry from Galena Bay to Revelstoke, the Revelstoke side. I have an opportunity to be turned loose full-time in my own truck. Those are the best days. Get turned loose in your own truck, but you'll have some fun. I don't even know, Al, if they still run that ferry across there, or if it's a bigger ferry now than it was when we did it or not. But that was quite the experience. That one stands out in my mind. I thought we were going to have to get the paddles out. I was amazed the barge didn't sink. What's your opinion on the International 9900 Eagle with an 18-speed and a Cat engine? Newer Internationals are ugly garbage, but the one I'm looking at is well built and in good shape. They were nice trucks. They were nice trucks, and they were well-built trucks. International kind of fell off the wagon the last few years, but the older ones were really good trucks, and they were affordable trucks. And I'd be sorely tempted by that. With an 18-speed and a Cat engine, I'd be sorely tempted. That sounds like a good truck, man. Check out the history of it. Make sure it hasn't been abused. But
SRT Bang with the $5 donation. Thank you very much for that. Been driving for 14 years for numerous major companies. However, looking to become an owner-operator by next year. Any insight for a first truck?
SRT Bang, first, thank you for the donation. Appreciate it very much. I, myself, always had better luck with new equipment. I'd advise a truck right off the dealership rather than buying used if you can. That way you've got some warranty. That's my advice on that. I'd try to buy new. And well, if you've been driving for 14 years, you probably have a pretty good idea of what you want for specs and stuff like that too. And that way you could pretty much pick the spec that you wanted to run as well. You know, you're going to spend an awful lot of money on this truck, on any of these trucks when you're buying them. So I think it's important for that kind of money to buy something that you like, something that you can look forward to getting into every day and going to work. If you buy something that you just don't like, it just doesn't suit you, it's going to make the job that much harder to do and that much tougher on you. So go new, go to a dealership that you can trust with a good shop, and pick out the truck, respect the truck that you want rather than what they've got handy. That's my advice on that.
Jonathan, thank you very much for another 5. So if being forced out of my lane, should I maintain my lane and risk a major accident, or move and risk being at fault?
The sad truth of that is, that's a good question. The sad truth of that is you should stay in your lane and hold your lane position. Maintain your lane, because then you can't be found at fault. That's what the insurance companies are for. But especially if you've got a dash cam, it shows that you've stayed in your lane and these fools buggered you up. It clears your name. And it can be tough to do. Your reaction sometimes, excuse me, is to swerve. Your natural reaction. But legally, the smart move is to just stay in your lane and try to get her stopped. John Howell, what's the best starter truck for a new driver? John, depending on what you're doing, of course, that's going to be different. Like if you're running local as compared to running highway or something like that. But I always preferred buying Packard trucks. Kenworths or Pete's, I found they were a little better than the competition a lot of the times. The dealerships were smaller, so you stood better chances of getting in the door when you needed to. The resale value was there at the end of the day when you wanted it. I prefer the Packard trucks myself. So that's the truck I always just bought. Not as a starter truck even, but trucks I stayed with throughout my 40 plus years. Al Stewart says they still do run that ferry. He crossed over there yesterday. Is it, Al? Is it any bigger, that damn thing? Like, it would only hold 2 trucks when we were on it. That was the max. Mind you, they were trains, so we were about 75, 80 feet long with them. But we took up the whole ferry. I hopefully they got a bigger ferry, but or at least one with stronger engines.
Slick Huey 23 with the $20 donation. Thank you very much for that, Huey. I lease a truck with Prime Inc. running dedicated food grade oil to from Port Newark, New Jersey to Canada. I am guaranteed 71% of $5,500 a week and intend to average $2,100 to $2,500 a week depending on the circumstances. Is this a good deal?
Slick Huey, thank you for the donation. I'm going to pass that over to Kathy really quick because she can crunch numbers faster than I can. I'm assuming that when you say you're pulling food grade oil, you're pulling one of Prime's tankers, and running a tanker with your own truck saves you probably a couple miles to the gallon right there, just because chemical tankers and oil tankers are so much smaller and slipperier. They fit behind the truck better. You just get better fuel mileage with them. So, Kathy, any input on the?
It's $3,900 a week.
$3,900 a week. I'm guaranteed 71% of a $5,500, but tend to average $1,200 to $2,500 a week.
How much is the insurance?
We'd need more numbers. Well, like how much you're paying for insurance and stuff like that. Operating authority, all the deals, everything that Prime takes out of you for that. I believe Prime takes about $1,000 a week for the truck. Do they not? Like at base pay, $5,500 for a trip that's where are you? New Jersey into Canada, depending on where in Canada you're going. But that's not I think we're talking about a 500 or 600 mile trip here if you're going to Toronto or Montreal. So that's darn good money for the distance, but what's your net after Prime gets through with you there? That's the number I'd be interested in.
He's guaranteed 71%.
71%.
Which is nice to have a base.
Yep, that's pretty respectable. Yeah.
Need more info.
But yeah, we Slick Huey, we need more information on the rest of your deal there. Lee, get a kitchen-facing dash cam and see what she says. That's what I need. That's from SoCal Sandman. A kitchen-facing dash cam. I'd get busted all the time. Panama Jack, stay in your lane. He agrees with us. I always do, even when traffic is emerging onto the interstate. So do I, Panama Jack. Sometimes I don't even worry about slowing down, but yeah, that's what I do too. I just hold my position and let them work around me.
Jonathan, thank you very much for a $10 donation. I know the right thing to do is maintain your lane, but if I wouldn't have moved, I would have jackknifed him, and there almost certainly would have been a fatality.
Yeah, that's a tough call.
Then it's up to the driver.
That's your call, Jonathan. But yeah, if there's, if you think there's a potential fatality,
That's not your call.
that changes the whole scenario.
Next question.
SRT Bang, thank you for another $5 donation. New truck noted. However, do you recommend a new lease purchase over a finance, being as though this will be my first rodeo? Thank you for another 5, SRT.
SRT, thank you for the 5, and I'd recommend financing it, just because it might be easier to get out of than a lease purchase. Like if you decide for whatever reason that you want to move on or get another truck or change carriers or whatever, I'd go the finance route rather than the lease purchase. SoCal Sandman, I see you there. Dave, would you try to drive the Mac Anthem? Josh, Bulldog. I drove a Mack dump truck a few years back. I can't remember what model it was, and it was actually a pretty nice truck. But yeah, sure, Josh, I'd try to drive it if I had the chance. I enjoy trying anything just to see what I think of it. Yeah, SoCal Sandman says lease purchase no, financing yes. I agree.
Daniel, thank you very much for the 2. Don't see many reefer drivers, so I guess they don't.
Huh.
Not sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that, Daniel. But it's funny, the reefer market is growing just because of the transportation with this vaccine going on. That's all got to be reefer freight. But different parts of the country see reefers less or more often. California sees reefers all the time, for instance. Depends on where you are, I guess.
Trey Dean Harper, oh, it doesn't say Dean. Trey Harper with a $20 donation. He says, hi to myself and everybody else here. Good to see you in the chat this afternoon, Trey. Glad you could make it.
Hey, Trey, thanks for the donation. Appreciate it. And thanks for the shout to Nick. I know he likes that, so appreciates that. Al Stewart, it's bigger for sure. There was myself, 4 logging trucks, 2 loaded, 2 empty. This is the barge or the ferry, and a half a dozen cars. How do you feel, Dave? I've only done 1 run with another driver. Should I insist on more training? Al, the more training, the better. I would. If they'll let you away with it, I'd go for as much training as you can possibly get. And you'll still be learning after you're out on your own for a while. So I would take advantage of the training as much as possible. There's all sorts of stuff you can learn from an experienced guy.
Just some clarification. Daniel, you didn't have to do that again, but thank you. Daniel adds to that comment about reefer drivers due to not getting paid to clean the trailers out.
Really? I didn't know. I can believe it though. I didn't know that was part of a reefer driver's job now, but I could certainly believe that it would be. And hopefully the reefers, I think most of the reefers they've gone to these days are flat floor reefers, so they'd be easier to sweep out than the kind we used to have with the aluminum duct corrugated floor. Those were a bugger to sweep out. But if you're running reefer and you're hauling hanging meat, for instance, and you get blood on the chem light from the hides and the sides and stuff like that, I don't think drivers should have to scrub that off. That's what you go to the truck wash for and get them to power wash it off. That should be, if they're company trailers, companies should be paying to wash out their own trailers. As a driver, I wouldn't mind sweeping something out, get the wood chips off the floor or something, but I sure wouldn't be scrubbing the inside walls. If that's part of the job, I don't blame them for getting out of reefer work. SoCal Sandman says, and I think he's talking about Mac here. I think he's talking to Josh. I think he's referring to the Mac, says slowest trucks on the interstate. You're going to hurt his feelings. Josh, I think we've said this before too, Josh, if this is a reference to you, but they're more of a, the Macs are more of a vocational truck, like meant for dump truck work and stuff like that. You don't see a whole lot of them on the highways, especially out west. Yeah, Captain Nice Guy says quite a bit of Walmart's grocery freight is reefer. I see them all over the place, given that there's a distribution center close to where I live. Yeah, and you would see that, and that's a lot of freight. Walmart has a lot of freight and a lot of grocery freight, so there got to be a lot of reefer work or reefers involved in that kind of work. Absolutely. Whoops, got caught in my mic here. Where are we here? Oh, SoCal Sandman was talking about the prime trucks being the slowest. I thought he was talking about the Max. Josh, I apologize. SoCal Sandman, what has Prime got the trucks restricted down to now? They were slow before, as I recall. But they had some of the smallest trucks I ever saw, too, as I remember. They had these little itty-bitty Freightliner trucks pulling 53-foot trailers. I don't know if they still do that anymore. It was like a city working-class Freightliner with a wee tiny little bunk pulling a 53-foot trailer. I don't know if they still do that or not.
Daniel, thank you very much for another 5. And yeah, no worries. The phone autocorrects can be a little bit funky sometimes, especially if you don't know how to disable them. But either way, thank you for another $5, Daniel.
Rastamar, pulling reefers, I have to wash out pulling hoppers, I have to wash out frequently, and I get like $25 every time I wash out. And I've never done that, Rastamar. I wouldn't think it would be too tough to wash out a hopper trailer, and certainly everything would drain to the bottom. But at least you're getting paid for it. And that's, if you can do that in like a half hour, 45 minutes, there's nothing wrong with that for $25. I do that, no problems. Yeah, some shippers require a washout receipt before they load you with produce. One drop of blood and they'll run you off. Lee Harvey said that, and he's absolutely right about that. The reefers, if you're hauling food products, those shippers want to see those trailers clean, and some of them will even chase you out if you've got wood chips on the floor from the last load of pallets that you had on. If the fork truck chipped your pallets and left little pieces of wood, they don't even want to see that. And their argument is there can be bugs in that wood, and they're right. So, yeah, you should, if you're going into a place to load any kind of food, the trailer should be spotless. I agree with that. If you don't own the trailer, it shouldn't be your job to make it spotless. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Patrick Jerry with a $5 donation. Old Macs built like a new tank. New Macs are just like a Volvo with Bulldog on the hood. Thank you for the 5, Patrick.
Volvo owns Mac now, I think. And I think I just saw that the Volvo plant in Virginia has gone out on strike. So between the fact that they can't get these microchips to make the trucks, and now they're out on strike, all the truck manufacturers are having a tough time. But Mac especially, now that they've gone on strike.
Have you ever seen a Mack truck in the Montford lane?
No, Kathy makes a good point, and I can honestly say, after 40 plus years, I never saw a Mac in the Montfort lane. She makes a really good point there. That's kind of how a guy my age judges trucks. So, Grilled Mortal's here, and he says Manitoulin used to be the slowest. Now anything can be. Yeah, if you got caught in northern Ontario behind a Manitoulin truck, and they used to call those super trucks, and I have no idea why. I think it was because the drone box held extra freight, and it was a great idea because what they could get in the drone box paid for the fuel of the truck. But by Christmas, those trucks were slow. And when we were running out through northern Ontario to go west, if you got caught between behind a Manitoulin truck on a 2-lane road that's 1,200 miles long, oh God, some of the slowest trips you'll ever have. But I don't see Manitoulin trucks the way I used to. I don't know if they've cut back or they're not so busy, but not that that's a bad thing. Focus Transport. Hey Dave, I had a question for you. Have you ever thought of running multiple trucks with a carrier? I'm an owner-operator with 10 trucks on with a carrier. I have never thought of that because I always preferred to keep the money to myself, so I ran my own authority when I had more than one truck. But you'd sure want to be sure that you're with a reputable carrier. That is for sure. Now I've known guys that have had multiple trucks on with FedEx, for instance. Not a lot of them, 3 or 4 trucks, and those guys got out because FedEx changed the pay. But if you had a really good carrier, and there are really good carriers out there, maybe that would be a good deal. I've never tried that myself. Captain Nice Guy, when I hauled dry bulk back in 2005, the company paid me $30 to get the hopper washed out between loads when necessary. Happen once a week or so. That's pretty good, and can't sneeze at that. But I think that's a fair thing. You want the trailer to be clean because you don't want contamination. And when we hauled, I've never hauled dry bulk, but when we hauled chemical, for instance, they were apoplectic about the cleanliness of the inside of the trailer, and they would look to see what you'd hauled last, just in case there was contamination and the washout wasn't good enough, and they just wouldn't load some of the trailers depending on what they had in the tank before, because they just wouldn't take the chance. So which is a good thing, a fair thing. There was a guy in Michigan a number of years ago that had a chemical reaction, and it's on YouTube. I don't know what he had on before and then what he loaded, but the trailer literally started to burn and melt from the inside as he was trucking it. And he pulled into the ramp in Sawyer, Michigan to the truck stop, and the trailer exploded right there on the ramp. And it's on YouTube. Check that out. And that's from mixing 2 different chemicals in the wrong trailer. It was scary to watch. David says, I've had receivers wash out the truck right at the dock. Yeah, and some of the meat places too will do that. When I hauled hanging, some of them would hose the trailer out before they'd start loading it. That's a safety precaution. Can't say as I blame them. Jay Holzer says, Raider Express out of Fort Worth, Texas are slower than molasses in January. They make prime trucks look like rocket ships. My God, they must be slow. Roger Penske's made it. Hey, Roger, how are you? Carlos has a question. Do you know if a citation warning goes on the driver's record? Yes, it does go on the driver's record in most states and provinces. Well, it's a warning now. But so does it go against their score still? So yes, Carlos, yes, it does. And I speak from experience because I got a warning in Louisiana one time, and it came right back to the carrier. Just a warning. Warnings are more CSA points than fines, Kathy tells me. I didn't know that, but
I think that's right.
Huh. No, yeah, just anything like that. You try to avoid having it on your record.
Daniel, thanks for another 2. How are the Teslas doing? I haven't heard anything recently.
Daniel, the latest on Tesla, other than another big crash they had lately, are that they're behind in production again because they can't find batteries with the range that Tesla has promised their customers. They were promising a 500-mile range on these Tesla trucks, and they're getting 300 rather than 500, and it's just because they can't find the batteries that will hold out long enough to get them the 500 miles. And I ran into a guy in town here 2 weeks ago that was driving a Tesla car. He was transporting it from one dealership to another. They told him it would do 300 miles. He said he hadn't gotten 200 miles out of it before he'd had to charge. He said he had trouble finding charging stations. They were wrong about how far the car would go. And he said he'd spent 5 days hopscotching across the country. And he spent all his time looking for charging stations because the batteries drained out that quickly. I don't think you'll see him buy one. Okay. Dave, what's your tire of choice? Had factory Goodyear steer get down to the cords this week at 150,000 miles. That's from Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon, it's really tough to get any sort of good mileage out of the steering axle tires. I always had the best luck with BF Goodrich, believe it or not, on my steering axle tires. I found they wore as well as Michelins or Bridgestones, but they were less expensive. So those were what I tried to run on my steering axle anyway.
SRT coming in with another 5. He says, thank you for the advice. You're quite welcome. Last one, primary haul dry van. Any recommended direction to go with the first truck, Freightliner, Volvo, etc.? Thanks for another 5, SRT.
SRT Bang, I thank you for the donation. And I believe I said as I preferred Kenworth or Pete's always, just because I just found I got good service with them. I got a good truck out of the deal, and I got great resale. So I tended to avoid the Freightliners, for instance. But I'd recommend Kenworth or Pete's anyway.
There's nothing wrong with those trucks. It depends on the work
Yeah.
you're doing.
Yeah, and Kathy's right. It depends on the work that you're doing with them too. So I just found that like the quality control in the Freightliner was lower. I did have to say that. I found that was an issue with them. But Josh, Bulldog, does Peterbilt have the best dealership in Canada coast to coast? It'd be a tough call between Kenworth and Peterbilt across Canada. They both have really good dealerships in Winnipeg and Calgary and BC. So yeah, you'd be pretty safe running across Canada. I was even in a really nice Pete dealership in New Brunswick one time, and I was impressed. So yeah, I think if you're going across Canada, or if you're going across the States too, those guys have really good dealerships in key locations right across the country.
Did you answer the question about tires?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay, we should go. Here's Container Guru. He says BF Goodrich's are awesome steers. Yeah, Container Guru. I had good luck with that. SoCal Sandman says Bridgestone all the way, and they are good tires too. Like I can't say that I had any better luck with BF Goodrich over Bridgestone or Michelin. I was just always to get a better price on the BF Goodrich. But they were all three of those excellent tires. Didn't care for the Goodyears, didn't care for the Firestones as much.
Daniel, before we take off here, thank you very much for another 5. Companies switching to automatic to train guys faster and getting them to work ASAP. This helps save money for damaging manual transmissions and clutches.
Daniel, thank you for the 5, and yeah, good points on why the carriers are using automatic transmissions. And you're right, they can absolutely train guys more quickly on automatic transmissions. So there's a plus for that for the big carriers right there. Great point. Anyway, I should wrap it up. Thank you guys for all joining us today. Appreciate it. Hope you guys stay safe out there. Be careful. Keep the rubber side down. Good talking to you. We'll see you on the back haul. Good night, everybody.